So today I want to talk about 5 things that I wished someone told me before I started my PhD. So if you're doing your PhD right now, you will probably recognize these 5 things. Or if you're thinking about doing your PhD, these 5 things will probably help guide you into making a better choice. So hi, I'm Charlotte Frasa, a second-year PhD student in computational neuroscience at the Donders Institute in the Netherlands right now. And today I want to talk about these 5 things that I wish someone told me before I started my PhD. So the first thing is that the most important choice you will make during the start of your PhD and what kind of topic you want to do is probably the choice of your supervisor. So your supervisor is the person that will decide if you graduate in time, what kind of papers you can publish, what kind of subjects you can research, and also what kind of money is allocated towards your research. So what kind of resources you can get. And that is why your supervisor is the #1 thing you must pick right. And I've seen before that people choose based on the university, for example, the university name, or based on the fame of some lab or the location. And I think all these things are valid, but what is more important is that you have a good supervisor. So if your supervisor is narcissistic or only wants his name on the paper or has a very strong opinion on what kind of research you can do, you will be very limited in your PhD journey. Whereas if your supervisor is accommodating and very supportive and allocates a lot of resources towards you, even if he is from a smaller lab, your PhD experience and the results that you get from your PhD are probably so much more valuable. And that's why I would really recommend before starting your PhD, if you can, for example, start a little project with your supervisor, so a little lab rotation before you officially start. Or if this is not possible, to, for example, interview some students that have worked with him or her before, such that you get a really good insight into what kind of person your supervisor is. And if, for example, your communication skills match, or if how you want to be supervised matches with your supervisor. Yeah, and I think this will really make your PhD journey so much more smooth if you have someone that matches you in that sense, because it is the person that you will be most close with during your PhD journey. And the second thing no one really talks about is the importance of writing papers and also how the paper writing system is kind of broken. So in general, your entire academic career will be based on an H index, and your H index is basically correlated to how many papers you published and how much those papers got cited. But of course, this system is quite easily to be rigged and to be hacked. So what big universities, for example, do, or big labs do, is they cite each other's papers such that these labs have higher H indexes. And I think in general this is extremely bad, and almost everyone agrees with the fact that the paper writing system is broken in a sense. But what no one really talks about is the fact that you will still be pushed as a PhD student to write in these big journals that are known to be rigged and that are known to have faulty systems. So if you are not comfortable with playing this game, I would really recommend to look at smaller labs that are less focused on this kind of fame rigging. But if you're willing to play along a little bit, just keep in the back of your mind that this is just part of being in academia, and hopefully it will change in the coming years with the new generation. And another thing I think people don't talk about enough, as soon as you start your PhD, you kind of have to think about what you want to do after. Because I've seen a lot of students that are graduating right now that don't know for sure what they want to do after. And one of the things is, if you know beforehand that you want to stay in academia, you really have to think about how to get your funding after your PhD for a postdoc. And funding is based on, for example, how many papers you wrote, but also how many teaching hours you had. And if you know this beforehand, you can schedule your PhD in such a manner that you have some teaching hours, and also to choose projects that are easily publishable. But if you know you want to go to industry afterwards, course, your PhD journey would probably look a little bit different. I would, for example, then recommend to do some courses that are suitable for the skills they ask in industry. So for example, I know right now in the industry that I perhaps want to apply for, they ask Java coding skills. And I'm coding right now in Python, but I know in my final year of my PhD, I will probably take a course in Java coding and get that up to speed such that I have a smoother journey into applying for certain industry jobs. And the fourth thing no one really talks about, and especially nowadays, is that your social circle during your PhD matters so much. And I think your social circle is everyone, including the people you meet in university, but also the people outside of university. So for example, your family or your friends from before university. And I think people don't really recognize enough how important this support system will be during your PhD, because there will be moments that you're very tired or you feel very lonely or you're not sure you want to continue. And this support system is really the system that allows you to keep strong and keep going. So I see around me that the PhD students that do the best are usually not the students that are most motivated or that have really strong working ethic, although this is of course also really important. But it's usually the students that actually have a really strong support system that also really supports their goals. So for example, they have fellow PhD students around them that can help study and that can help motivate each other to make those last few hours before a paper deadline. And the last thing, which I think is most important, is probably that the nature of your research is such that nothing will probably go exactly according to plan. And that is why you kind of need to plan to fail early and fast at the beginning, because one of the most important things you will learn during your PhD is that failure is a part of it, and how to handle failure will be probably one of the things you will incorporate quite quickly. So that's why I would recommend, especially at the beginning of your PhD, to not really focus on one project, but to have several projects and make them kind of short but snappy. And then when you notice that one project is probably has a lot of potential, to focus on that instead of putting all your eggs in one basket, so to say. And something else that I wish I had done a little bit more once I started was to write up everything, even if an experiment failed. Because I've seen before that papers were published on things that I had done, but for them it worked, but for me it failed. And I think it's really good to sometimes get insight in exactly what point you did differently, or perhaps you can write these researchers saying, oh, I did something very similar, this is my code, perhaps we can collaborate on the next project. So if you're struggling a little bit with your PhD, I made another video on some tips and tricks on how to continue, so to say. And otherwise, see you next week. Bye.